Next, we have the last talk today. We have Nikil Viswanathan, co-founder and CEO of Alchemy, and also alumni of Stanford. And Dan Boneh, professor of Stanford University and co-director of Stanford Center Blockchain Research, and also co-director of the conference we have. The topic is going to be building great Web3 apps, lessons from building the most popular Web2 products. All right, so got the mic.
I'll borrow yours.
All right.
Okay, great. Okay, welcome everyone to the last session of the day. It's been a long but wonderful day. Thank you, Nikil, for coming. So let me first of all introduce you a little bit. So let's see. So thank you, Nikil, for joining us, of course. So let's see. So Nikil is one of the founders of Alchemy. I mean, I think everybody in this crowd knows Alchemy. You probably actually used Alchemy too. So Alchemy powers over over $100 billion in annual transaction volume, which is quite something. Let's see. So Alchemy was a very fast-growing company. I guess I think it grew to like 10 billion in over 16 months or so. So very, very quickly, a very rapid growth. But what's interesting, I think, is Nikil wasn't, even though it took 16 months to grow to that level, you were at it for like 10 years. Doing lots of different things. And I'm going to ask you about that in just a second. But before he started Alchemy, he was a student right here.
Yep.
Took my classes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That was my favorite assignment. Probably one of my favorite assignments at Stanford was the hacking the VM.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Excellent. Hopefully that was useful also in Alchemy. And so, thank you so much for joining us. Really looking forward to the conversation. And we can keep it open. So if anybody has any questions, I have a lot of questions for Nikil. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to just jump in and we can kind of keep it lively. So I think the first thing I want to ask you is actually, I think the story of Alchemy is really really interesting in that I like to tell it in that you started doing X and you ended up doing Y.
Yes? And X and Y are very different.
And X not equal to Y.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is actually a very common, this happens a lot to entrepreneurs in the space, actually in other spaces too. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that story. It's really interesting.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Dan. It's always, every time I come to campus, I'm like, this is such a magical place. Besides being warm and happy and sunny, it's just the energy and the intelligence here is out of control. So. And Dan said we're going to get some spicy questions, so excited for that. Should we talk about, do you want to hear the whole thing or like from Alchemy starting and the pivots through that?
I think, just maybe the pivots is kind of interesting. Literally, you started doing X and you ended up...
even before Alchemy, like the 10 years.
As a bridge.
Okay, I'll give a short version. Yeah. So, ultra fast background to me. So I grew up in this like super small town in Texas that no one's ever heard of, Lubbock, Texas. Came to Stanford, did undergrad and grad in AI, took Dan's class, one of my favorite classes. And then it was basically at a very high level. I thought about my life and I was like, all right, how do you have a big impact on the world? Because you only have one shot. Why not really try to hit a home run, right? And I think the way I measure that impact is on two axes. Your x-axis is how many people's lives you touch, and your y-axis is how deeply do you improve their life every day. So number of people times depth of impact, right? And the area under that curve is your impact on the world. So how many of you are students right now? Raise your hand. How many of you are doing a startup? All right, how many of you want to do a startup? All right, so it's like most people in the room. Okay, so basically, for the first kind of, so it graduated, didn't apply for any jobs. I was like, I'm just going to go figure this out. And for the first, actually, like four to 5 years, actually, it was a really, really, really interesting thing because we had this, my co-founder Joe and I had this kind of really incredible experience at Stanford where we had all of our amazing friends around us every day. And it was just like this amazing community. We said, look, we want to do that for everyone on the planet, kind of make it feel like you live with your friends. So through that period of 5 years, we built, probably like 12 different products. Nothing worked. It was crazy. It was really hard. It was a lot of fun.
It worked. It just didn't catch on.
Sorry. The products, they functionally worked, but no one wanted what we built, right? Which was a big lesson. And then we finally built this one app where like no one's going to use it. It ends up being like spontaneously the number one app in social in the world in the App Store, and then millions of people around the world. And happy to share the stories about that. But really in 2017, we had seen crypto for a long time, but we had this really interesting thing because our product was like a college product. So it was for students, and students were out that summer. There was these guys downstairs from us building this company called Wire. It's like a payments company, Yanni and Michael. And we would host a lot of parties together and play beer pong together, and at like 3 a.m. we'd have these conversations about Bitcoin, how it's going to be the future. And 2017 was really a big shift because that was when Ethereum really started taking off. And I think for us, when we looked at the big shifts in technology, a lot of our investors had created companies like Facebook and Google and LinkedIn and PayPal and all these companies. And what we saw was like, whenever you have a big shift in technology, you have a chance to create like a really fundamental platform or really fundamental company that has really massive impact on the world. And that was to us, Ethereum and crypto looked like it could be that shift. We didn't know. It was 2017. It was early. We didn't know. We weren't for sure. But when you look at the 3 shifts in technology over the last 100 years, the computer, the internet, and Web3 or blockchain, each one gave you a new fundamental building block. And I think this was actually like the key thing. There were 2 or 3 key things where we're like, this is the right industry. Number one is fundamentally, it was like a new paradigm, and from a programming sense, right? So computers gave you this capability of machines to execute and follow human instructions. The internet comes along and says, we're gonna give this new building block, right? And machines can exchange information. Now the the Web3 comes along and says, okay, machines can exchange value, they can transact together. And that was never possible before, right? And even if you look at things, like I studied AI for like 6 years, and if you look at AI, it's like very transformational, but it's really just the internet and computers combined, right? It's machines computing and machines talking to each other, right? Crypto was the first new paradigm, and we said, wow, like this could be a big thing. And we weren't really sure because we said, look, maybe it's not. But at least if it's not, it's going to be at least as interesting as anything else we're doing. We can always come back to doing our social apps. But if it is, it's kind of Jeff Bezos' regret minimization framework. If it is, and we miss it, and we could have built the Apple, the Microsoft, or like the Amazon, the Google, right? We will always regret it. So we said, all right, let's try this crazy crypto thing. So actually, when we started Alchemy, the first product was actually this kind of like hedge fund, data science, machine learning platform, right? Because that was our background. We had infrastructure, all this kind of stuff. And we basically, we had built this like product for all these hedge funds to use. A lot of lessons from that, which was interesting because one of the topics I'm happy to talk about is like product market fit. So we actually made a bunch of money from it, but we didn't have product market fit, right? And about 2 months in, we said, look, wow, it's so difficult. We're big nerds. We code it every day of our lives for like 15 years. If it's really difficult for us to build, we have a master's degree in Stanford from artificial intelligence. Not saying this to try to impress you, but to impress upon you, if we're going to have this technology widely distributed around the world, and that needs to be something that everyone can use and build on and learn, right? And it was just so complex and so hard. And we said, we need to make it easy to build, right? And when you look at the other industries for the computer, that's what Apple and Microsoft did with the operating system. They abstract the underlying complexity, make it easy to build, right? With the internet, you have kind of AWS that's done that. And most people don't know this. AWS 2021 was 75% of Amazon's profits, and the shopping side was 25%. Last year was 100% of Amazon's profits was AWS.
Just to go back for a second, so you were trying to build a DeFi project, right, back in 2017?
It was kind of, think of it as like a machine learning
yeah, the details
platform.
on that. You were trying to build basically something, a DApp basically, something that interacts with a blockchain.
Yeah.
And you realized that interacting with a blockchain
was really difficult.
Really difficult.
Yeah.
And so what happened next? What happens next?
Yeah, so it was interesting because we said we need to build a developer platform to make it easy, but we actually waited a year because we said the market is not here yet. And we said in order for us to have a developer platform that has a real business, because we decided not to do a token. So we said in order for us to have a real business and be a sustainable business, we need to have customers. And the space was just really early in 2017. And the number of people who had successful, because when you look at your customer base, you want them to be self-sustaining, right? So there's these ICO projects and other things, but the total volume or total number of those was small, and they weren't quite self-sustaining businesses. So we said it's too early. So we actually started building the platform in 2018.
But I like this aha moment, because that's actually a thing that everybody here should aspire to have.
Yeah.
This aha moment, that this thing, we're trying to build this product.
Yeah.
Building the product is not hard. Building the back-end system is hard.
Yep.
If it's hard for us, it must be hard for other people.
Exactly.
So maybe there's a business in making it easier for other people.
Totally. And
that's kind of the birth of Alchemy.
100%, right? And I think there's a few lessons wrapped up in there. I think one, to build, so when we started building crypto stuff, we kind of sat in a room and brainstormed for like a week or 2 weeks. It was honestly a really bad way to come up with a startup idea. Like don't ever just sit in a room and brainstorm, which in retrospect, we were like, oh, we don't know what to do. I think there's a couple of key factors, right? number one is you really need to be a domain expert. You need to be really deep on the technology and understand what's going on. Because if you understand what's going on, you'll immediately see all these problems that can be fixed. If you don't, like we weren't at the time, right? We had just kind of pivoted from consumer apps to crypto, and I think a mistake was we didn't deep dive on technology enough because we're like, oh, we need to figure out something fast. The second thing is kind of what you were saying is solving your own problem. At the end of the day, if you can build a product that is solving a problem that you have, that's not. It's sometimes difficult because like maybe you have problems which aren't applicable to a broad market, or sometimes maybe it's an industry that's you don't want to go into. But in this case, like we knew exactly what the problems were because we had experienced them ourselves. And if you can continue doing that, like that's like the easiest way to get user feedback, to build a product, and it's almost like the ideal case.
Mm-hmm. And so so you came up with this approach of the idea that other people would need help in interacting with the chain, and kind of that's what makes Alchemy work, and everything kind of took off really rapidly.
Everything didn't take off actually.
Okay. That's a good story.
So I think like also just to give you context on like how much everything didn't take off. It was 2020 December. At this point, I am 10 years out of undergrad, 8 years out of grad school. Sorry, 10 and a half, 8 and a half years out of grad school. All my friends are getting married, having kids, buying houses, having cars, like all this stuff. Joe and I live together out of our like kind of one bedroom, like loft apartment. We had one bedroom and then kind of a loft area apartment. We were working out of there. I think we had just moved to the Wire office, so we were renting space from them. And basically like we had nothing to show. We had put in like about 8 years of work, and we had like nothing to show. We had no money. We had just raised our salaries. I think we were taking like minimum wage. We didn't pay ourselves for several years, and we took minimum wage like 30K or something. And then we just raised ourselves to like 70K. I think maybe it was 100K or something like that. And I was like, oh, I'm rich. Everyone's like, you have no money. It's less than like an intern at Facebook, right? And I think the thing was like to the entire world, it's like these guys are complete failures. They have like nothing to show for what they're doing, right? And it was really interesting because there was a company that came to buy us for the third time in December 2020, and we were just like, should we do it? Should we not? And we had always really wanted to just. I think one of the things that Joe and I. And happy to chat about co-founder stuff because I think that's one of the most important decisions you make. But we always just said two things. We want to build something that sounds crazy to say, but really improves life for everyone on the planet. We want to have fun while we're doing it. Like all the other stuff we didn't care about, right? And we're like, what would we do if we had a bunch of money? Nothing really different. We would just do what we're doing now, except maybe we'd have all our friends live together in our apartment complex because it'd be a lot of fun. And so we decided, not to go through with this and then not to do a sale. And we'd never really considered a sale, but they bought another company for several $100 million. And it would have been, Joe and I have no money this time. 2019, actually, good story. 2019, when we had bumped our salary, was the first time. I'm 9 years out of undergrad, 7 years out of grad school. First time I got guacamole and Chipotle because I was like, I can, kind of afford this right now. I'm not even joking on this. So, yeah, it was a big moment. So and then 2020. So we were like, but look, if crypto takes off, when crypto takes off, people are going to need this platform. And we thought it'd be 2-3 years, maybe 5 to 10 years. This was December 2020. January, crypto started taking off. We do 3 fundraises. The company goes from like 72 million to 10 billion in 10 months, and suddenly it's the fastest growing company ever. But like there was 10 years before that no one else saw.
One thing that's actually kind of useful to say here is that there's a certain point in time where it makes sense to take these risks.
Yeah.
It's exactly when you're kind of out of grad school or out of your undergrad.
Exactly.
There are later on in life, these risks are much harder. Once you have kids, believe it or not, they expect you to feed them.
Yeah.
And so, so these kind of risks are actually harder to take. So this is actually the right time in life to take these risks.
And everyone says startups are risky. I couldn't disagree more, right? Because like you have one life. Like what is the opportunity cost of not going after what you actually want to do, right? And if you're, especially if you're an engineer, like your worst case is like somebody's dream job. Like you go to Facebook, you go to Google or whatever. That's like your worst case outcome, right? And Joe and I were like, look, if we had to work at McDonald's, I will be like the best McDonald's employee ever. Like I'm gonna get employee of the month every month. Like I was just like, I'm not gonna starve to death, and anything beyond that, like whatever, I'll figure it out, right? And I think there's actually this thing, I've seen this over and over and over, where I have so many smart friends who are like, I'm gonna do a startup, but like, let me just do a year or two at Google or whatever. Then you're making like all the money, and then you're like, I'm just gonna stay another year, then I got a promotion, then I'm making more money, let me just get a bit more savings, and you're just like stuck, right? Then you get married and you have kids, it's kind of hard, so.
Yeah, so there's a right time in life. Actually, that's actually very good advice to hear from you. So,
yeah, totally.
So, what you're saying, if I could paraphrase, tell me if I got this right, is when you graduate, maybe this is the right time to go and take risks and do something like this is what you're saying, and do something like a startup. You can always go join Google and Apple maybe later on.
Yeah, totally. And I actually think like, I don't even think it's a risk. I think it's a risk not, I mean, okay, to be clear, it's not everyone has to do a startup. It's like definitely a trade-off in life. You will you will not have time with your friends. You won't get to do a lot of vacations. You won't make a lot of money. You'll sacrifice a lot of things. And you should not, for just a caveat, like do not do a startup because you want to make money. There's so many easier ways to make money that are less stressful and whatever. It's only if you actually really like it. It is the most fun thing you will ever do, but it is not for everyone because it's just not a lifestyle that everyone wants, right?
It does take over your life.
100%.
You'll think of nothing else.
100%, literally all the time.
Yeah. So again, since there's so many entrepreneurs here, I guess maybe you could talk a little bit about how do you it isn't very important for people to know that they hit on a workable idea, an idea that has a good product market fit, as the VCs like to say.
Yeah.
How could you maybe give your advice?
Totally.
And how do you know that you've hit on the right idea?
Totally. Okay, so this is a feel free to cut me off because this is kind of a much larger topic.
Okay. A bridge.
A bridge. Okay.
Lots to cover.
Product market fit is the hardest thing in building a company. Full stop. I mean, okay, so maybe like finding the right co-founder, but other than that, like product market fit is like by far the hardest. Everything else, it's pretty formulaic, but product market fit is super hard. So there's a couple questions. Like one, how do you know when you have product market fit? Second, how do you get product market fit? Third is like, what things do you do before and after product market fit? Let me answer the first one first, right? And this is gonna feel like it's not an answer, but it is honestly the best answer, which is advice we got. And it's really hard. It's not like the most tactical answer, but it'll help. If you were asking the question, do we have product market fit? Or I think we have product market fit, or I'm pretty sure we have product market fit, you don't have product market fit. So that is the most important thing to understand. Like when you have product market fit, it obviously you still have to work and you still have to go grow your product. But people want your product. People talk about your product to their friends. There's like a waiting list of people who are interested in your product. There's people are coming to you proactively and say, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this thing, right? And there were so many times, especially in consumer social. So we built like social apps for a long time, and the question was like, do we have product market fit? And looking back, we definitely didn't have product market fit. But then for those of you who build anything like consumer, there's always a question of like, especially network businesses or marketplace businesses, there's a question of, do we have enough critical mass, or is it just that, we need more people to use the product and then it'll stick and all the network effects will happen, or do we not have the right product, right? And usually, and there's a couple answers on that. Usually the answer is you don't have the right product. There's occasions when you need to kind of get the right critical mass. So like one of our friends who had given us advice in the early days founded Pinterest, and they had to kind of nail the right market, which is like kind of middle America moms, and then it worked. One thing actually for those of you trying to find product market fit. So I think there's kind of this idea that I need to solve a big problem that affects a lot of people, right? But when you think about this 2x2 matrix or grid of like how important the problem it is, like how important the problem it is, like either it's a small problem that people have or a big problem that people have, and then how many people does it affect? A small number of people or a large number of people? And you're like, yeah, fuck yeah, like top right, like huge need and large number of people. But the reality is that's never the case. You're never gonna have a product that's like a huge need and a large number of people because somebody else would have done it, right? If it was really that big of a need and that big of a thing, like a big company would have done it, somebody else would have done it. That's just never gonna happen. So then you have two options. Either you build something that a lot of people want a little bit, right? Or something that some people want a ton. And the answer to actually what to do here is actually a little counterintuitive, right? And this is actually from Ben, who started Pinterest, gave us his advice, which you kind of normally think, okay, let me just do the thing a lot of people want. But that's actually not the right thing to do. I mean, sure, it's not saying that'll never work, but what you really want to do is build something a few people like really, really, really care about. Some people really care. And then you expand that market. And right, ideally, you hope that that's a growing market that becomes really big. Right? And if you look at all the great companies, like let's say Facebook, right? Like Facebook was just like, it was like literally just for Harvard students to see like who was in your classes. Like that was it, right? It was not like everyone in the world is going to communicate on this thing, right? Or even Microsoft, when they started, they built the programming tools, right? They built like compilers, interpreters, these things, and they started this thing called personal computer, operating system personal computer. And I think the founder of IBM had this famous quote where he's like, I think 5 people in the world total will own a personal computer. Like it was not clear that this personal computer thing was going to be big, right? right? So it's really like picking the right thing. And I think everyone in this room, you are like doing the right thing, because all my friends, I'm like, hey, what should I start a startup in? I'm like Web3, maybe AI, but like that's the thing, because it's like this early market that has a massive potential. If you build something here and you're betting on the market to grow, it's a really good time.
So can I ask you, I'm going to open up to questions in just a second, so you guys have to think of good questions. But can I ask you, this is a very common, actually I like what you said, that if something is desperately needed, somebody else would have already done it.
And it has a large market. Yeah.
That actually happened. You guys weren't the first ones to build the tools to interact with the blockchain.
No, not at all.
So how did you? Basically, how did you deal with the competition?
Yeah.
And with the existing competition?
Yeah.
And how did you deal with the fact that other companies probably want to replicate you and do exactly what you're doing?
Totally. It's a great question. And now it looks obvious. Like in retrospect, like at the time, everyone's like, this is not a big business. Like all the VCs in 2019 were like, crypto's not a thing. AWS for crypto is not a thing.
VCs.
Sorry, some VCs, yes. Obviously not the ones that invest in us. But a lot of people told me face, they're like, this crypto thing, it's just not really gonna be a thing. The AWS for crypto, not gonna be a thing. It's gonna be commoditized. It's not gonna be needed. People run their own infrastructure. Like, it was just like, that was the prevailing belief. And there was one company besides us that was doing it. They had basically 100% market share, and they offered the product for free. And
it's kind of hard to compete with that.
Yeah, it was hard. It was hard, right? And they gave it away for free. And because it wasn't really a company, it was more of like an organization. And the other thing,
are they allowed to be named? Or?
Yeah, it's Infura. So honestly, I think they're like one of the unsung people who helped crypto come to the world. Like in the early days, Joe Lubin, did an amazing job with MetaMask and Infura, provided the core infrastructure that really developers needed. And I honestly don't think they get enough credit, right? And if you look at their model, they were more of a, Joe owns a huge chunk of Ethereum. He's like, I want to help the Ethereum community succeed. Like, I'm going to build these public utilities, right? And then we came in and we said, look, like a bunch of people had come to us and said, hey, we really need kind of like enterprise scale technology here. Can you come build that for us? So that's what we came in and did. So. Sorry, I forgot the question.
So that's how you dealt with. So the question was, how did you weren't the first to do it.
We weren't
but
the first
somehow
to
you
do
became the biggest.
Yes.
And there must have been other people who tried to replicate you.
Totally.
And somehow you didn't.
Totally.
That didn't hurt you.
Yeah, totally. The other thing to say here is the market was tiny, right? When you go do these VC pitches, you're like, all right, like our total addressable market is $1 trillion of like every company in the world could do this, or it's like $100 billion. We had this Excel spreadsheet, I actually pulled it up the other day to see, we're like, okay, how many small companies are there? How many big companies are there? How many kind of medium companies are there? We did the math and we're like, it's about $5 million total if we get the entire market. And then I was like, let's increase the numbers a bit. And then we were like, we got to about $10 million total. So this is like, not a good start here. But we said, look, either crypto is going to be a thing and this is going to work, or it's not, and we'll go back to doing this consumer social thing, right? So then the question was like, we had a bunch of people come in over time. So in the early days, there weren't a bunch of people because everyone's like, this is not a market, it's going to be commoditized, it's not valuable, all this stuff. But then once we started working, especially in 2021, once we started doing fundraisers and it kind of became clear this was a big market, a ton of people came in. So I think there's a few things. I was actually just talking to Mark Andreessen about this, and he basically says technology, a lot of people talk about technology moats. And technology is like, at the end of the day, like we built a kind of the core product of Alchemy is, if you think about what Google did, before Google, there was a bunch of different search engines. They were like, search is done, it's a thing, it's not a thing. Yahoo had one, AltaVista had one, Lycos had one, and everyone's like, this is not a thing. But that was before the internet had product market fit. There just weren't a bunch of people on the internet. Once a lot of people came on the internet, you started people hacking and spamming, and they would put like white text with white links to optimize keywords in the bottom of their header, right, or bottom of their website. Then Google had to come in and do two things. They had to build a new search algorithm, and they had to build a new distributed storage infrastructure to store the entire web, because the web grew really fast. We kind of did the same thing. We built kind of a new type of distributed storage infrastructure, and we built this kind of new consensus algorithm on top. So there was a core technology advantage, and I think that has been there, and that was honestly one of the big things. But I will say some of the other things, like we were just like really obsessed. We were just laser focused on building a really great product for our customers, right? When we had done the 10 billion round, we were 37 people. We had no marketing. We had no recruiters. We were basically all engineers. It was like all engineers. We had spent no money on marketing. We were basically just like obsessed with building product. Was that the right move? I don't know. We could have grown a lot faster if we had kind of built out more of that. But the point here is we were just like laser focused on our product. Every customer, this is one of our secret sauces. Every customer had to want a direct Telegram chat with us. Joe and I remember this one time, the Khyber guys in Vietnam were messaging us at 3 a.m. Joe and I were like moving apartments because we were too cheap and never hired movers. So, I'm driving the U-Haul, like he's like unloading my furniture and like, and like we're like responding, we're doing customer support for them. So I think it was kind of this, you have to win your business every single day. There will always be a company that is new, that is hungry, that is smart, that has a great team. And you just have to like, at the end of the day, like hard work and hustle is like very underrated.
I guess it's good to remember, like, I'll tell you, like, since you brought up web search, I remember this might be before many of your days, but I was using Alta Vista before Google. And then one time I was searching for something and Alta Vista gave me terrible answers. So I said, for the heck of it, I'll try Google. I tried Google and it gave me the perfect answer. I never used Alta Vista ever since. And it's transitioned to Google completely. I imagine the same thing happened with you.
I actually just went back to Alta Vista.
No, I meant... I meant people are using maybe other services. Maybe they weren't happy. They tried you. They saw the customer service that you were providing, and they switched and never looked back. Yeah, that's kind of the experience. Maybe that's kind of the lesson for folks in the audience here.
Yeah, you have to win your customers every day, right? And it's like it's hard. Running an infrastructure business is super hard because if our site goes down for 1 minute, like, a huge chunk of the crypto ecosystem has issues. Like we can't even, we do.
Good. I'm glad you brought that up actually, because I was going to ask you. I didn't want to just give you a softball question.
Yeah,
I was
totally.
going to ask you one question that I'm very curious to hear how you respond.
Yeah.
So many of in the Web3 space, actually, the only way to interact with the blockchain is through Alchemy.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's by sending queries to you.
Yeah.
So there's a common lament, complaint that you have become become a centralization point for the web, for Web3. So all the decentralization story is great, but at the end it's all Alchemy. So how do you respond to that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Okay, I'll say this. I don't think I've said this publicly, but whatever. Okay, so basically. First let's define centralization and decentralization, right? In Web 2. When you work with a centralized company, they own your data and they can, they kind of own all of your infrastructure. So let's say AWS, right? So like, let's say I build a website or like Netflix, right? Like, or actually concrete app, Parler that was on the App Store is on AWS, right? If Amazon decides, and this is not decides, like they literally did. They shut off Parler. They're like, your data, I think they gave them back their data, but it's like, you are done. Like you can't access your data anymore. We're not going to serve it out. There's no way you forget it. And it is like absolutely done, right? And I think so the first important distinction, and then I'll get to the second part, in Web3 is the data is completely open, right? So what is Alchemy, right? We are a centralized pipe to a decentralized data store. If people want to leave, and this is why VC said it's not a good business, because they were like, you can swap to any other provider in sub 1 minute because you just change the URL. The entire API is exactly the same, and you can run your own node, you can work with another provider, and you still have access to the same data source. And that's actually why, it's actually another reason why it's a really hard business, because we don't kind of have lock-in on the interface layer. The second thing.
Neither Google does.
That's true.
They just provide a good service.
Exactly. Exactly. I actually gave this analogy. I like really regretted this. I gave this analogy in an interview to press, and they like quoted me on it. I was like, I really regretted it. Basically, I was like, look, like if you think about your internet service provider, right? Like, just if you're using Comcast, if they shut, if you don't like Comcast, you can go to like AT&T and they'll you can still get the internet. It's not like, oh, Comcast said no, so you can't get the internet anymore, right? And then they quoted me like, Alchemy CEO says Alchemy is a Comcast to Web3. I was like, I did not say that. That is not what I said. But I think the other part of this is, so when we started, we actually said, duh, obviously we need to build this a decentralized way. And we actually talked to 50 companies before, and we're like, hey, we're going to build this decentralized product, blah, blah. And there was a very clear signal from the market. I think this is one of the things we did differently than a lot of companies, where we said, we're not just going to build kind of random stuff. Like, we're going to get feedback from users, and we're actually going to build something that people want. Because we had built a lot of things that people didn't want, and we're like, let's actually build something that people want. And one of the things in the early days was loud and clear. It's like, there's a Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So there's a Maslow's hierarchy. It's like, whatever, food, shelter, all these things, and then you have like enlightenment at the top, right? And actually don't remember that's on the hierarchy, but whatever, you get the point. So basically, like when you're going through life, like if you don't have food or shelter, like you're not worried about entertainment or enlightenment or any of these kind of things, right? And similarly with Web3, there's kind of like in Maslow's hierarchy of products, right? First, you need to build something that like functionally works, right? Then you need to get users and have people using the product. Then you want it to be kind of censorship resistant and decentralized, right? So I think two parts. Like people were like, look, we're still in the how do we build stuff and how do we even get users and build something valuable phase, right? And I think we're still very much in that phase. So we said we don't care about the third thing right now. Obviously, if we were a bad actor, we don't have incentives to like shut people off and these kind of things. Maybe it would have changed. So we actually paused the decentralized stuff, and we've kind of had it in our back pocket. And we're like, hey, it's ready to go. We're gonna do it as soon as people want it, but just the market need is not there right now. And I think it would be very different if we own people's data, but because we don't own people's data and we're the Comcast to Web3, people are more open to it.
Mm-hmm. So the answer is basically you're saying no one can prevent you from deploying on the blockchain. We can't prevent people from deploying.
People can instantly switch over to anybody else. So I think the short answer, people can instantly switch over to anyone else. We don't actually have any centralization control there. And then the second thing is, and people do that. People swap like in real time between a bunch of different providers. And the second thing is like we've thought about it from the decentralized angle. We've actually worked on it a ton, and we'll do it as soon as the market needs it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yep. Good. Yeah. Answer. In fact, there was a talk earlier today about the Google version of a blockchain node that people can use if they want to.
Yeah.
So
totally.
Options exist. Excellent. So I think what I'll do is it okay to open it?
Let's do it.
Yeah. Let's open it up to questions from the audience. I see people already queuing up. So yeah, please go ahead.
So it's very interesting. Like, so there are a lot of questions I had. So it quite relates to us also on those parts. Like, there's two questions that I want to ask. So I'll go with the first one, right? So when you had that 70K of funding with you, right? So what was and then after you said when you had that funding, there were like 3 offers made to you, acquisitions offers. Mm-hmm. So what made you that conviction that Alchemy would be at this stage, which it is right now?
Okay.
Maybe repeat the question first.
I think the question was like, we basically had no money, we had an acquisition offer, and we turned it down. How do we know that Alchemy would be where it is today? The answer is we didn't. We had no idea. Even if you'd said like, hey, like, what is the odds of next year turning out like this? I would have been like 0%. Like, no way. This has been like impossible. We were just like, look, I enjoy building things, and I like hanging out with my friends. I got to do both of those while building the company. And I don't know. I don't need anything else. This T-shirt was like $8.
Do you have advice for somebody else who's in this position?
Yeah.
What should they do?
I think it's very person dependent, and I think if you took a sample of people in people's lives, for a lot of people, the right answer is like take that, right? And it's a life-changing amount of money. You get to build something really cool as part of another company. Like by no means, I think the lesson you should take away here is not like, oh, this is the right way to do it, but like here's one path. And I really think the whole point of what I'm trying to say here is like it was like everyone sees the press and the headlines and all this stuff, but no one sees like the 10 years of grind before. So whether you should take an acquisition or not, like that's a whole separate story and like probably like personal and dependent.
Yep. So another question is like, suppose you're building a product.
Yeah.
That is competing with Zoom.
Yeah.
And Zoom has already existing behaviors.
Yeah.
So, but you were in this situation, right? As Dan asked a very good question, right? So how would you build a product like which already exists?
Yeah.
And make a better version, and then people compete like by copying your idea over those things.
Basically,
repeat the question.
what I'm hearing is like, hey, if there's an existing product that has like dominant market share, how do you come and win that market effectively?
And existing user behavior. So this example I would take like threads.
Yeah.
Threads, and even like all of those things. So I just wanted to understand like, can there be another social media network possible?
Yeah. So the question is, well, yeah. Basically it's like, how hard is it to come take over an industry, and like, will there be another social media network? I actually have like strong thoughts on that one. The short answer is like, the market was not like Inferior was there, but the product had people came to us and said, hey, the product's having a lot of problems, a lot of issues. If they had a great business and they offered a great technology and they offered it for free, we couldn't have done anything, right? So I think this was a unique case, and also the market was really small, so it was growing, so we had opportunity to capture market share, right? If the market didn't grow, we wouldn't really have business today. The second thing is will there be another social network? I think especially consumer social is a whole nother topic, but it's very, very, very difficult to go head to head. You saw Google with back in the day, now Facebook's a massive company, but back in the day, when I was an intern there, Facebook was not a massive company. It was this small company. Google went with Google Circles head on, and it didn't even make a dent, right? And I think think of all the search engines that have competed with Google, nothing's worked. So I think when you build a new kind of consumer product, if there's dominant market share by existing player with entrenched behaviors, you're not going to be able to go head, and obviously, there's never any absolutes, but it's very difficult to go head on and compete with them directly. The next, what competed with Google was Facebook, and what competed with Facebook was Instagram. What competed with Instagram was TikTok or Snapchat, and then what competed with Snapchat was TikTok, right? It's different products that compete and win.
That's actually good advice for thinking on how you build your own.
Don't build the. Yeah. Oh, actually, one thing I want to say that I think is really important. As you're building products, I think there's two or three really, really, really important things that you should do. And these are the most common mistakes that I see young entrepreneurs and people building products do. Number one is, if you can't build, and this applies especially for consumer products, but in general, if you can't build a prototype in a week, it's too complicated, right? All great consumer products and all great products do one thing very simply, a very specific thing that is the only thing they do. I get a lot of people coming and be hey, here's this app I'm building. And I was this page with all this stuff, and this other page with all this stuff, and this other page with all this stuff. And actually, Evan, who founded Snapchat, gave us really good advice. He's look, if you can't explain the value of your product in one line when you're drunk at a bar, it's too complex. And that is actually spot on, right? And I think the other thing there is you want to ship really fast and get feedback really fast. You do not, if you, and one of our investors, Reid Hoffman, has a really, founded LinkedIn, he has really great advice. He's if you're not embarrassed by how bad your product is, you waited way too long. You should be I don't even want to show this to anyone. Our very first version, normally we built this complex infrastructure. It would take 6 months to build. We'd already built it, but we're we need to rebuild it. And I told the team, we're going to do it in a week. They're there's literally zero chance we can do this in a week. I was we're going to do it in a week. They're how? We can't even do it. How are we going to build the marketing website? It's why do we need a marketing website? It's how will people know what the product is? We'll just tell them. It's okay, but how do we build the dashboards? And I was well, we don't need dashboards. Well, okay, but how do we build the docs? It's we don't need docs. This is the same API. How do we send them their API keys if they can't log in dashboard? I'm we'll just text it to them, right? So it's we literally built this. It took a week and a half, but it was there was no polish on it. It was literally we would text the API keys to the first users, which was CryptoPunks, OpenSea, CryptoKitties, Dapper Labs. So ironically, those are the ones now the massive company in space. But
sounds like a pretty stressful 10 days.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's open it up for other questions.
Yeah.
Gil, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
You have unique insight into what people are building in Web3.
Yeah.
What are they building?
That's a great question. So we actually launched a developer report that talks about.
The question first.
Oh yeah, sorry, great. Basically, we have unique insight into what's happening in Web3. What are people building? So the short answer is we have a developer report which talks about all this stuff. You can check it out. I think one of the really, really cool things that I'm personally excited about is. Since the 2021 crash, we've actually grown very significantly in our user base. I think we've roughly 4x our user base, which kind of shows us that, hey, people are still building, right? And I think there's these macroeconomic indicators of crypto prices tanked and all these things. But at the end of the day, right, the true value of these cryptocurrencies will be, are there real applications that people are getting value from? And if there are, that's great, and the crypto will be worth a lot. If it's not going to be, right? And the leading indicator of that is actually, are people building valuable products? So we've seen this massive rise in people building. The second thing we've seen is this kind of industry agnostic, right? It's obviously NFTs are having a hard time, but we're seeing stuff in gaming, we're seeing stuff in social, we're seeing stuff in DeFi, we're seeing stuff in large enterprises. I was talking to the Instagram CEO the other day, and he was we had to cut stuff because, I think it's okay if I say this, we had to, I always a little sensitive when I say stuff on live stream. He's we had to cut stuff because Facebook is trying to be efficient and they're just cutting all departments. But he's we're super into Web3. We're gonna do a bunch of Web3 stuff, in next year, and it was actually super exciting to see. So
actually, maybe you can help me a lot of our students always ask, they come and ask, they're wondering what to do in their careers.
Yeah.
So they ask, should I go into Web3, or into blockchain,
Yeah.
or should I go into machine learning?
Yeah.
How would you help people make that decision?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think like I was gonna say, like, you can't make wrong decisions like Stanford, Harvard, but there is clearly a right decision there, so you can make a wrong decision in that case. But basically, what I would say is I think a couple things. Like, you want to be part of an industry that is like growing and will have a big impact in the future. I mean, if you want to have impact. Some people are like, hey, I just want to build. I really enjoy doing these XYZ thing. I really enjoy making art. I really enjoy like building the specific type of thing. Like, a lot of people are like, I just want to build a consumer app, and that's great. Like, if that's what you really enjoy, I think it really depends on what you want to do. If you want to have big impact and you're like, hey, I want to like have a big impact on the world, you need to be in an industry that is growing and that has impact on people's daily lives. I actually tell people, I was like, if you're doing something in startup, you should either do Web3 or AI. I think AI is really exciting today because there's a lot of like tangible applications. But remember, AI's been around, I don't know, 50s, 40s, 60s? Yeah, somewhere around there. And I'm talking about like 1960, right? Like, people are coming up with the first kind of models and Bayesian networks and all these different things. Like, crypto is new. It's like 10 years. So I think the trade-off here is, like, in AI, you'll get to do kind of more cool applications that probably more people will use in the very short term, the next 1 to 3 years, like, that people will use broadly, and it's like really cool and really exciting. The flip side is, in crypto, you get to be kind of, the analogy I get to use is like, when you're doing your PhD today, you spend a bunch of time and you make this kind of advancement in science, but it's also like, it's the fields are like very mature, and in math or computer science, it's like you're making a small advancement in one area. Versus like Newton in the early days, he's sitting on the apple tree, gets hit on the head, and he's like, oh, gravity, right? It's kind of like the Newtonian, because it was a totally open space. It's kind of the Newtonian days of Web3. Like, anything you do now, it may not be like hugely adopted in the next 6 months or next year, but it will be so foundational in the sense of like, someone is kind of come build the transformer model equivalent in Web3, right? And like, that could be you guys, right? So I think it's like the trade-off here is, do you want to do something that's more application specific, kind of tangible use case today, which, not that you're saying you can't do that in crypto, or do you want to do something like the space is like 80 years earlier or 50 years earlier, and you get to build something really foundational?
Maybe the way to say it is that Web3 is not as crowded as other places. Yeah,
totally.
So
it's just earlier.
Your impact is going to be greater, and in some sense, the work you do in Web3 today would go into the textbooks of Web3 of the future.
Exactly. And if you think about like the pyramid, right? Like, anything, the inverted pyramid, anything you build now in crypto will just have like a massive, massive impact on the whole space and the whole world.
Let's see. You've been waiting to ask your question for a while, so go ahead.
I was just going to ask, so you mentioned like the necessity of having like domain expertise.
Yeah.
I feel like, how would you navigate that as a student now when you look at crypto needs to like ZK and IBC, and just like, how do you know what to find depth when there's so much stuff going on?
Wait, sorry, can you summarize that one more time?
Yeah, so how do you know like what to exactly get depth on?
Yeah.
Because you said like domain expertise was really important.
Yeah.
Especially now in Web3, there's so many trending topics.
Yeah. Shout out to our interns. Who's our intern?
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. Okay. So, the question was like, how do you decide what to narrow in on and what to focus on? Because the space is so broad. And the answer is like, it doesn't really matter. Just like play around with stuff. Like, what I would say, I think the best way for those of you who are engineers, if you're not an engineer, I would honestly say like learning how to code might be valuable. It's not the only way to build a great business, but especially in such a technical space, it's really powerful. And you don't need to be the best engineer in the world, but even like to understand the technical kind of facets of it. The second thing is, I would say, like, just start building stuff, right? Start building stuff. You'll immediately notice a lot of problems. Honestly, like if you like, whenever I build stuff, I'm like, wow, like there's like a gajillion things we could be doing better at Alchemy. The space is so open. And then I would say, like, choose areas that you're interested in. Maybe for like, hey, I'm in finance, I really want to do DeFi stuff, or I'm in, I want to do core protocol stuff because I really like math, or I want to do consumer stuff because I really like building stuff. I would just say, like, explore, and then don't get too fixated on this, like, I need to find the perfect startup idea. Just start building shit. And like, you try something, it doesn't work. You try something, oh, you're like, this is cool. But then by doing that, I learned this other thing, and that thing's really cool, and so on and so forth. So the short answer is just get started. And actually, sorry, one more. I think there's one really, really, really important thing, which is not really said anywhere, but I think is very underrated and very kind of impactful. I kind of, like, every really great entrepreneur I've talked to, I remember when I was playing chess with Mark at Facebook, I was just a random intern, but there's one desk next to Mark and it happened to be my desk. And I was like, Mark, did you know Facebook was going to be like the thing, right? And he's like, no, dude, I built like 9 things before Facebook. And, we actually thought this like wire hog file sharing thing was going to be the thing, not Facebook, right? And that was like, you look at any entrepreneur, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Elon, like whoever it is, Mark Zuckerberg, they all just built a bunch of shit before, right? And I think like, not that I'm anywhere near that category, but it's like I have a Dropbox folder about like 90 different projects that I built. And I think the 2 things I would say is like, just build a bunch of stuff, like be prolific. You learn so much from doing that. And the second thing I would say is like, actually ship and get people to use the stuff that you build. Because like out of the 80, 90 things, I maybe shipped 5 to 10 of them. And it's just like, 99% of the value has come from shipping and learning. So I would say those 2 things are like not usually said, but super, super valuable.
It's a very important point. That people are known for the last thing they built.
Yeah.
But they did a lot of things before to get to the last thing. Yeah. By the way, I would say that Web3, the beauty of Web3 is such a broad area. It covers, if you want to do math, you can do zero knowledge. You want to do economics, you want to do distributed systems, programming languages, verification, user interfaces. It's such a broad area that there's like, everyone can find their niche inside of the space. Actually, I've lost track of time. When are we supposed to? How far are we? When are we supposed to stop?
I think we're good.
As in, this is a good stopping point?
Yeah, I think.
Oh yeah, we're like way over.
Okay, I see. We went a little bit over.
I'll hang out and answer your
actually,
questions.
can you stay? I'll just 2 minutes to close off the conference, and then we'll
perfect.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
sure.
awesome.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you just stay here to go out of the way? Yeah, just stay here. I will close the conference. 2 minutes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Nikil and Dan, for the awesome talk. So this marked the end of BAS conference. Thank you so much for coming to the conference. I just want to take the last minute of this conference to thank the people who made this conference successful. Gil, Steven from Accelerator, Aaron and Ironmill team, Sam Green and Semiotic Labs, Rick, Trudy, Jay, Bridget, and Sophie from Stanford Blockchain Club, and also Dan Boneh and Stanford Center of Blockchain Research. And I heard a really good comments about this conference, about the caliber of speakers, the new thing people learned, and the quality of attendees, and amount of meaningful conversation they had. So again, thank you. And the end of BAS marked the beginning of SBC. So see you guys tomorrow at SBC.